Hi, Scott.
Hey, Nicholas.
Okay, we're recording now. I'm going to let you go ahead and tell us. I asked you a question about what you wanted to talk about, what was out of bounds, and then you went into something pretty deep, and I wanted you to start that over on recording. So go ahead. Tell me
Yeah,
what interests you. Go ahead.
I seem to feel right now that if we can get a dialogue going, that other people can either participate in, or at the very least, they can see a dialogue between two people that's counter to the mainstream. I think, as I said earlier, people are just barraged today. They don't know that it's happening, but they're barraged with ideas that are they're from the programmers. Let's just put it that way, and it's incessant. It's nonstop. It's everywhere. They're being messaged and programmed with so many different ideas all the time. Um, some are subconscious, some are just flat out conscious, but they just don't know it's happening. And I think there's a struggle that goes on inside of every individual where their conscious mind and their subconscious mind are are battling. I think because of the way our egos are programmed from the time we're children, the conscious mind and the ego usually went out, but the subconscious mind, I think, is sitting there, just poking at them. And some people, I think, if they could see dialogue like this, they might say, you know what, I'm going to give myself permission to consider ideas that previously have been off limits or have seemed uncomfortable, or I just didn't want to go there, whatever the case might be. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at on the subject, and
Yeah.
also for me, uh, getting comfortable presenting uncomfortable information, if that makes sense. That's something I've been working on for 15 years now, and I think I'm getting a little bit better. But I know some of this information that we'll probably discuss today can be so incredibly off-putting to people that have been indoctrinated and brought up within belief systems. So yeah, I'm hoping this might be a very simple but precise avenue to get people into that mode where they give themselves permission.
Well, let me ask you a question. That I find that a lot of people that haven't watched stuff like this, but or maybe that have come to this through my channel and already know my position on these things, they usually think that people that have your opinion have never been on the other side. So, what's your background?
No, that's a great question. So my background would be, Midwestern, conservative, Christian, um, and everything that goes with that, flesh consumption, you know, fairly strong political ideologies. Yeah, I mean, middle America kind of stuff.
Well, so when did you get the call from Morpheus, so to speak? What woke you up? What was the thing that got your attention? If it wasn't 9/11 or something like that, for most people, that's what it
Yeah,
was. But
yeah, no, 9/11 was a big gambit on their part because it did wake up a lot of people. Most people 5 or 10 years after the fact, but and I would say that from a recalibration standpoint, 9/11 was actually very important to me. But I think it all started when I lost my job of 22 years in an industry that I had almost more or less grown up in, and that was during the great financial crisis, I guess they're calling it now, but the whole 2007, 2008 housing bubble slash collapse. And yeah, I mean, that was, I let's face it, we all think that all we got to do is the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people are, how hard you work and that kind of stuff. And the game's not rigged. Don't worry, the game's not rigged. You're just not working hard enough or whatever. So I had to take what happened there and decide, all right, what can I do differently in the future? So I invested in even heavier into politics, which I've been kind of I voted, but I was kind of a lackluster political um, disciple, and And I said, that's gonna be the key. That's how we're going to avoid this happening in the future. And because it was financially challenging there for us as a time, as a family, and yeah, so I, I dove into that, and got into some of the Ron Paul stuff, and started trying to sort all that out, believing fully that I could cast a ballot or a vote, and I could have an impact on my life going forward, and that the system was fair and the system wasn't rigged. Um, as I got into the Ron Paul stuff, I started to realize that the currency system, the money system, was not exactly what I thought it was. And then I think I got into some online teaching at the time that was available. I don't know if it's still out there or not, but talking about the money creation scheme. And at the time, I'm still, by the way, at the time I'm practicing evangelical devout Christian as this is all going down. Um, and
Very
but
similar to my story. Go ahead.
yeah, really, that's cool.
Yeah.
And and basically, so I'm holding on to that while trying to sort out all this other stuff. But the deeper I go down the whatever he likes to call the rabbit hole, the deeper I went down the rabbit hole, the more I realized, man, this is messed up. And it started to kind of chafe a little bit with my Christian mindset, because I'm like, well, two things. First of all, how is this allowed? Uh, and when I went to the church and the church leaders, man, did I get a cold shoulder? Matter of fact, I almost felt like I was getting reprimanded on some of this stuff. I'm like, hey, this financial system, this is usurious, and I can see here in scripture that's not something we're supposed to be participating in. And, just all these inflection points where it started to clash with my faith. And yeah, this was a large church, and one that anyone from our area would be familiar with. And yeah, I mean, they couldn't shut that down fast enough. You know,
What's interesting? The people that put together the version of the narrative that we have today, they protected the sanctity of the Messiah never having touched money. If you go through the New Testament, even the black magicians that composed that thing, they knew better than to mess with that variable. And there was some, they inserted a lot of other truth in the fabric so that the hook would sink. But I just find it amazing that they protected the sanctity of the fact that the Pythagorean Essenes wouldn't touch money. And they had to make up that story in Matthew about him catching a fish with a magical gold coin in it. And so indirectly, somebody else paid the temple tax for the Messiah, so he still never had to touch it. So even the author of Matthew, who I believe is Josephus, uh, had enough respect for the original point of the rebellion to protect that part of it. And I find that really intriguing that they told us the truth about that part of the story and that we didn't pick up on it.
yeah, and I might take a step further. Whereas, yeah, you look at the back of the only note, the Federal Reserve note that hasn't been changed over pretty much since the inception, which is the $1 bill, and there's clearly some spell casting taking place in the back of that note. And I wonder if maybe from an energetic or so-called karmic standpoint, that they couldn't defile that part of the story that you're describing. They couldn't just flat out lie their way through that part of it. They had to leave that open, or their magic wouldn't work. Their black magic wouldn't work. That's something I've pondered.
Yeah, they seem to be definitely immune to the synonymous consciousness of love and free will united. And when you're at that vibration, it seems like they can't touch you. And the thing they fear the most is you reaching that point of consciousness. And so they have to like walk the donkey with a carrot away from that center point that we're all trying to find in different ways. And money does that incredibly well. And I think it's how we got way off track. If our species was ever on track, I'm not sure that we were ever designed to be in equilibrium with the planet like any other species. We might have been from the very beginning designed for some very small purpose that for that was not natural or organic on this planet, and that's why we look
Mhm.
like tourists today, whether money or not. But that's another discussion.
Truly, yeah, and I think that's the avenue where they have to get you as a child, right? I mean, it has to start at childhood. If they Because if you reach that level of consciousness that you just alluded to, um, well, let's just say we were probably in that level of consciousness from birth, or we easily could have been
More clairvoyant.
compatible with, yeah, more clairvoyant and more compatible with our core um, design. But no, that gets off the rails. I mean, pretty much at whatever preschool level or Sunday school level, or whatever the case might be. Um, and so that's why it's hard on children. I think it's probably even harder today on children, with this system of, and I say this often to people, but look at what happens. I mean, your grandparents thought they were doing the right thing. Your parents thought they were doing the right thing. Your teachers might have thought they were doing the right thing. Maybe even your pastor at your church. I mean, these people aren't in on the scheme. They're just, they think they're doing the right thing, and that seems to be the way the program is designed. Is it uses our love against us, basically, is how I see it working most of the time.
Yeah, it's harvesting it like a man-made wheel put into an otherwise natural stream. Um, and 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 there's so much of that going on now that the stream can't flow. It just I, I I think that the money we have to slowly back. I don't know if it can't be done quickly, but literally we all need to convert our fake credits into land assets and start growing food again. That's their worst nightmare, is us being able to all be self-sustainable. Um, but as long as we're dependent on the network that is provided by our tax basis, we are walking into a covenant of our own free will, and that's something that they require. And I didn't stick to that earlier. I wanted to stick to that a little bit. The free will thing, from so many different points of view in my research that were supposedly completely unconnected, this almost otherworldly Bill of Rights seems to emerge that is true on and transcends everything on both sides of the veil. And the black magicians, like you said, they even respect that here, so much so that they have to tell us what they're going to do before they do it, as out of respect for the creator of souls' original intentions for free will and love. They know their magic isn't going to take if they don't at least respect that stream of consciousness. And so, in so many ways, they try to tell us while they're doing it. Um, but it seems like, and that's true in everything I've read from hypnotists that talk to people while they're in the theta state of consciousness under hypnosis, that are telling them what they're seeing on the other side. And when they're answering questions, the questions are 100%. I mean, scientific method, no matter who the practitioner or where in the world or where in the timeline, they 100% say that there's no such thing as fear, greed, hate, or any of those lower uh, consciousness things, and that there's this permeating sense of love and free will that is the creator of souls that's emanating through them, and no one doubts what that is. When they're on the other side, there's no deviations in religions or spiritual understandings, and you immediately know you're snapped back into a knowledge of truth and love and free will and out of this lower stuff. And that's so hard for Christians to realize, because they're told that there's a war in heaven. implying that evil also exists there. And like you said,
Originated.
yeah, like you said, it's just there's so many different hooks of deception that have been married to otherwise true things that we all know in our soul or subconscious to be true. Like do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and then they threw pay your taxes in there, and it was like what WTF? The guy wouldn't even touch money. The only way he would pay taxes is if someone else went fishing and miraculously caught a medallion inside of a fish's mouth. And then, under those circumstances, he would reluctantly submit to being caught at the door there with his pants down, not paying tax, with no money on him. And that submission, that act of submission by somebody who was crucified for his act against money and Rome is just purely satanic. I mean, if there is a definition for that word other than being of Saturn, if the other definition is adversarial to our best interest, then the story is purely satanic. And then I found out that Judas the Galilean was the crucified person in the Second Temple cleansing. So, when you start realizing what they've done here, it goes beyond uh, innocent and trying to guide us or keep us up to date with the times, so to speak. The manipulations that happened here were nothing like that. The interpolations that happened were so criminal that they changed human consciousness so profoundly that the Kabbalah decided to change the order of the tarot deck because it maps human consciousness in the lower and upper arcana. And so in the lower arcana inside our body, this path of how action happens from thought, and cards 1 through 11 or whatever. I'm not an expert at this, but I got into it because I wanted to know why the 8th and 11th card were swapped around Aleister Crowley's day and how everybody was on board with it. And it was because of the recent advent of money and the fact that it had just reached a point where it had permanently changed human consciousness in its recent introduction into the human development. That literally even the Kabbalists changed the order of the arcana of human thought, proving that righteousness was no longer the dictating the highest form of human thought. Now it was money. I can't remember what the other card was, what the 8th card was, but it didn't belong in the 11th position. That's for damn sure. It uprooted righteousness from the 11th position and put righteousness way lower in the 8th position. And so money did that. And the only way to fix our consciousness back to a pure state, an unpolluted state, is to get rid of money. And that's what Pythagoras tried to teach us before all of this developed. Sorry, I went off on that diatribe.
No, it's a great thread to pull on because as a former evangelical Christian, I saw three phases to my understanding of money. One was when I was a Christian, the scripture would say that it's the love of money. So whenever somebody in the church would get a little too deep on the subject of money and the fact that it looked evil, like look at what this stuff does. Of course, the church leaders would come out with a sermon and say, "Oh, hey, you're not reading the scriptures accurately. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil." And even then, I was thinking to myself, well, how would you ever know if you're loving money too much, right? I mean, you look at the way it's intertwined in everything. I mean, technically, when you wake up in the morning and if you have a rent or a mortgage or a car payment or anything, I mean, you got to go buy some groceries. You're loving money. You can't, but you kind of, you got to protect the belief system. So I put that on mind. Later on, as I understood the currency system and how usurious it is by design, and basically the Ponzi scheme that it is, then I would run into people that say, well, yeah, money's okay, but currency is not. Well, while I would agree that currency is far worse than money in the way that it's used as a weapon, at the end of the day, we get to the final step, which is money. And what is it? Well, it's assigning abstract values to things that occur in nature. So an apple's no longer an apple only, it's a dollar. And my health or my well-being, say I have an accident and I go to the hospital, it's no longer just, you know, the desire of good people to want to put my body back together. No, it's $49,563 is what it is. You know, so yeah, for me, I had to go through those different levels, and it took a long time because the whole time I never suspected that even the concept of money was a problem. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Me neither. I mean, it snuck up on me in my research. I didn't see it coming. The meat thing was the thing I discovered first through Dr. Robert Eisenman's work, the professor at Long Beach, UC California, that sued the Catholic Church in 2003 to release all of the Dead Sea Scrolls that we didn't have. And then he put out all these books about James the Just. And he didn't know that he had discovered Judas was the crucified person. That was actually, or if he did, he was afraid to say it. But he spread the data and he laid out the dots so that people could connect them on their own. And then one of his very bold students named Daniel Unterbrink decided to go out with it. And so he came out with the book Judas the Galilean to show everybody how they did it. And it's very deep. But it's once you follow the tracks of the crime and the enterprise, you clearly see that what they're hiding is monumental. And literally the reality that's possible on the other side of this dark matrix that they've created is a gorgeous one. To get there would mean uprooting the all the tabernacles with the oldest mark of Saturn on them across our country and right in our backyards. And people are so unwilling to even consider that that could be the problem. And that's how big of a task that we have ahead of us just in our backyards. And then that's before you even get to the money part. And then that's before you get to the gut bacteria befuddlement part that has been created purposefully by a collusion of of, uh, of dark forces within the industries that we trust to feed us, who definitely made sure that we were getting sugared and lots of dead carcass. And now we have a gut bacteria that is a cesspool. It's all the recipes for the worst things that you would ever want living inside you. But we're not told that we get worms. We're not told that we have spirochetes. We're not told that we have undetectable rickettsias that aren't detectable in any US hospital. But in every other hospital in the world, they can test for rickettsias, which is an intracellular parasitic infection that colonizes and can turn into hundreds of different neurological conditions that in the US are permanent misdiagnoses, like Parkinson's disease, that could have easily been avoided if people had been diagnosed properly with the meat eating disorders that had created it. But that would be compromising their false religious doctrine if the medical industry came out and said that we weren't supposed to be eating it and that it just feeds parasites and a consciousness that's controlled by these colonies. Which is why we have bipolar disorder and people acting batshit crazy because they're literally cesspools of infestation. And they're feeding it with Cheetos and sugar at the gas station in between trips to McDonald's. So we're all facing a weaponized gut bacteria problem on top of the monetary thing that we have to get rid of, on top of the false indoctrination tabernacles that need to be ripped up by the roots. So it's the problem is that large. And so I've found that the order in which this needs to be approached that's actually doable is starting with the thing that you have the most control over, which is your gut bacteria content. And as soon as you can purge yourself of all of the things that you accidentally grew in there and what's growing inside the rest of the cells in your body, and maintain that condition for 5 to 7 years while all the cells in your body replace themselves with cells that aren't compromised, then you can start to have a consciousness that was originally intended, and you'll start to be the bold warrior that you potentially could be against the other forms of mind control that are zombifying our entire communities.
Yeah, I would fully agree. I mean, my cravings for flesh did not subside for several years, probably I mean, fortunately I stopped cold turkey and never looked back. But it was what you're saying is what I describe now to some people that can handle the idea is it's really the actual demonic possession that people are trying to articulate in the movies with, oh, Rose, what was the movie, Exorcist, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that also probably has an energetic foundation, and it's the reason why you don't ask demons into your heart like when people pray
Right.
you know the uh, the conversion prayer in Christianity, and I'm sure they have other versions of that in other religions. I'm not picking on Christianity, but yeah, I mean, this as far as I can tell is truly the demon. It wasn't until my son said something to me like 7 years ago, and he got into this whole research about the three brains, the gut, the heart, and the mind, and the dominance of the gut in that hierarchy. And
Right.
and I learned a lot from him on that subject and realized, yeah, I think something else happened about the same time. I looked at this split down the middle thing sitting up in these craniums of ours. It became pretty clear when I looked at the Tesla tower and its design that this thing up here was actually probably more of an antenna than anything. And that this isn't where all the thinking goes on by any stretch. I don't know where the antenna links to. I don't know if it even does anymore, but it's clearly designed with both hemispheres never touching each other. Is clearly designed as some sort of bipolar antenna. Um,
Wow.
but 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 yeah, all of the activity, all the real thinking happens in the gut. And when you look at people's habits, behaviors, and then of course the uh, deeper impairments, like you mentioned, bipolar disorder, and we could maybe even start throwing in diabetes and stuff like that in the equation. It's clear that this is one of the reasons we as people don't we've lost our capacity for broad thinking and for and for impacting change, because that's obviously people always say, oh, use your gut when it comes to this or that or the other thing. Well, no one can use their gut anymore because it doesn't work. If you ask your gut what to do, it's just going to say eat more Cheetos and have a Snickers bar.
Yeah.
uh,
Kill something.
yeah, go kill something, shed blood. Maybe we should have a war, that'll fix everything,
Yeah.
you know so yeah, that's kind of how I realized that maybe this gut thing wasn't as euphemistic, I guess, as maybe it's been made out to sound, in the past when it comes
Yeah.
to thinking
And
with your. Matter of fact, it's almost had a pejorative context, like, oh, use your head, boy. Well, I don't know. If your gut works, you can use all three of your brains.
right. They call it the first brain for a reason. And I didn't know that background, but that fits perfectly with my research from a different perspective, that ended up with the first gut being the first brain. That important. It draws you like a tractor beam towards activities and things, even sexual stuff, deviations that wouldn't occur otherwise. So it creates all manner of of malware in the computer that is our mind and body. And so my discovery, and you haven't really spoken too much to me about the soul. Did you lose your faith in or faith? Did you lose your belief in your eternal soul as a result of your disillusion with Christianity, or are you like myself finding that Pythagoras' sense of reincarnation is what's being hidden here, and that we are divine?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when most people can't picture the idea of not living, right? Which is why we fear death so much. But we're told that death is the end. So you have this, you only live, this YOLO, you only live once. Or then I know the Christians like to quip, oh, you only live twice, but this idea
Yeah.
that it's destination oriented. Man, that's some serious mind humping there, because when you start there, you get all kinds of bad results in your intellect.
Yes.
You can't figure. It's going to be overwhelmingly fearful to think that you die and then go into nothingness, which is what maybe an atheist would believe, or that you die and then you face this judgment, and that judgment might result in an eternal torturing of your soul, or whatever the case might be. Of course, you never go to a funeral and they say, yeah, you know, well, Aunt Dorothy, I'm sure Aunt Dorothy's looking up at us from hell today. You never hear that. Everybody's always rewarding their loved ones and themselves with heaven, of course. But that endpoint programming is it's awful. So no, I'm definitely
The beginning point too.
yeah, right,
They've created a finite stop gut on both ends, and one of them they control
yep,
what happens next. And but on the
exactly,
first end, they want you to think that your parents got drunk and created a soul that's eternal,
right,
and that's
exactly,
not how it works, you know.
exactly, yep. No,
Or got
that's
drunk and demanded God to do it at that moment, get to making a
yeah,
soul, like that, like
yeah,
that's how it
yeah,
happens.
yeah. Get a
Um,
soul going here because we're making a meat suit for it.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's been quite a discovery to doubt that we are far more divine than anything the church was going to allow us to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the key, right?
Can you still
Yep.
hear me?
Yep. I got you.
Okay. My Bluetooth is jumping.
You're yeah, and you're getting a little bit of delay on your video too, but I can hear you.
Okay. You can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Um, anyway, what were you saying?
No, I think we're in agreement that the finite um, you know caption around the human existence is not only does it evoke all sorts of fear and then therefore bad decision making, um, but it's a rather implausible idea. I mean, as children, I think most of us, we go through that questioning process. As children, we knew these answers weren't great, but when they give you the promise of reward in heaven, for instance, or the threat of punishment, um, I've done a lot of research on that concept alone. And one of the things I try to appeal to with Christians, and it never sticks, it's weird, maybe occasionally, but this idea of deferred punishment for wickedness and deferred reward for righteousness, and how would those ever be of a kind and benevolent being, right? That's a recipe. There's only one side of the equation. Not that I'm not dualistically presenting that, but there's only one side of that battle that benefits from that arrangement, and that's evil, pure and simple. And I try to present that to people. Say if there's one thing to say that there's fingerprints on your religion that shouldn't be there. It's that simple combination of things, that it's first of
Absolutely
all
agreed.
it's preposterous. Number one, number two, it's evil in the strongest sense.
And now, again, going back to the people that put together this Bible, that tells us, mixes a lot of truth with a rudder of adversarialism, um, like the love of money was a small rudder that they threw in an otherwise true statement about money being the root of all evil. Um, what am I trying to say? Oh, so when I just made the discovery of the soul, and what was being hidden by Ezra and the Maccabees with the invention of the Torah, on behalf of the monetary interests, to sink the hook of money and into the teachings of righteousness. and put it into a codex that then could be used to create the matrix or whatever. And that's the reason Pythagoras never wrote anything down, because he knew that every time anything was written down, and all the great sages knew this as part of their initiation, that you don't write it down because then it will be used by the bad guys against us. So the living word is the only way that it should travel for that reason. You look a man in the eye and you should share the truth that way. And so that way it doesn't get corrupted by a third party. But in the Old Testament, one thing they were afraid to do was say that the God of the book was the creator of souls. And I noticed that with an Acrobat reader at first, and I couldn't believe that they wouldn't be bold enough to say that he was the creator of souls anywhere in the Bible, but they don't. In fact, and thank goodness for Madame Blavatsky, or I wouldn't understand the difference between human spirits and eternal souls. The the book says that the closest it gets to saying that he is the creator of souls says he is the creator of mankind and human spirits, quote unquote. And when you look up what that means in demonology, those are beings that are lower than the soul, that are associated with the physical body. These are at best benevolent spirits that used to be called demonic before there was a permanent negative implication to being demonic. They considered all of these human spirits to be demonic, some of them good, some of them bad. Now we only associate bad with demonic, so it gets a little confusing, but human spirits are not souls. And so the creator of human spirits and mankind is the demiurge that the Mandaeans clearly talk about still today. And they're probably the smallest religion in the world for a reason. This teaching has been stamped out by the forces of the demiurge since it's been taught. But this is the closest teaching that we still have to Pythagoras and the crucified person's crew and James. And the reason that they were vegan, and that has nothing to do with Judaism, and people can't seem to put together why a Jewish rebellious movement in the desert was anti-tax, anti-money, and anti-meat eating, when that has nothing to do with the Judaism that we know today. And the missing secret decoder ring here is that this psychological operation is so deep that they have used the name Jewish to make us take a left turn at Albuquerque. So we completely miss the fact that it was Pythagorean in every instance. But anybody that researches that word, Pythagorean, in association with the word Essene, will find out that just a few hundred years ago, it was commonly known that the Essenes that were part of this rebellion against Rome, the ones that started it in the desert, were living in exile from the Jewish temple because they weren't Jewish. They were Pythagorean. They were known as the Pythagorean Essenes. And so this is what the Ebionites that Paul called the poor they were the sect of the Essenes that were Pythagorean, that were anti-money, anti-meat. And that's why they were living in exile from the Jewish church, because they weren't following the laws, the kosher laws of Deuteronomy and blah, blah, blah regarding diet. So this is what's being hidden by the psyop that this is Jewish. It's a Jewish rebellion, a Jewish problem today. All of that is just a whitewash to make sure that we don't discover what's behind the software patches of the Old Testament and the New Testament, which is the teachings of Pythagoras about the divine soul's mission here, and against the monetary system. And that's not the original mission of the soul. It just became such during Pythagoras' time, as they were stamping the first coin, and he was saying this is a huge mistake, and they drove him out for it. And it's so early in the introduction of money. Really, we shouldn't be daunted by the task of getting rid of this cancer. Anyway, sorry.
Well, and I think you've got way more knowledge on those origins than I haven't delved that deep, and what you're saying makes total sense. I've often looked at, right there in the first book of the Bible, we've got the creator allegedly recommending what looks to be probably a fruitarian diet, or at the very least purely plant-based for sure. And then we have the deluge, and then after that we've got the foundation of the temple. Next thing you know, Yahweh, who I would say firmly, and people can call him God. I don't really care. I think he goes by hundreds of names. Um, he's now prescribing how he wants his burgers cooked, and he's got the Levites selling the flesh out the back of the temple after the sacrifice takes place, which might be the story of how broad scale uh, meat consumption actually took hold,
I would
because
call
it
it
was
the first biological weapon for political control. Go ahead.
yeah, no, that's an excellent way to put it. And here we have the merging of money, because the temple sacrifices, and we've got money changing going on in the temple, which is hilarious, so we already have this battle between gold and silver, and the gold ones got Caesar's face on them, and the silver ones the shekels are allowed inside the first wall or the second wall of the temple. So already the thing is on a scale of, and it's taken off, but buried in that is, this Yahweh finds the burning of this flesh pleasing to his nostrils. So they're barbecuing out the back of this thing. That's they're selling them. They're selling the sacrificed meat out the back door of Solomon's temple, and I think that's where the whole thing got going. Later on, you see discussions going on in the New Testament about, we think that the discussions are, finally they have to put that whole story to rest with Peter's dream. Okay, we
Right.
don't know who Peter. We don't know who was in Peter's dream. Let's just be honest about that. That could have been Belial. Well, it was probably Yahweh, but Yahweh's not the creator of this realm. I've come to that conclusion. You tell me if you think I'm wrong with that.
Yeah, he might be the local sheriff. But I do think that the Earth dolloped out of Saturn, just like the other successful moon projects that it's done, like Titan, and we find that Mars is our other sibling, and that there was a while there where our solar system was had Saturn at the center of it, and we were all huddled around it in a tidal lock. And we had to look right through our brother Mars to see the Saturn glowing right behind it, which created these streamers because Saturn's light was having to bounce around Mars to get to the Earth. And so this is where we get the ancient sun wheel of the golden age of Saturn. Before that solar positioning was wrecked by some other introduction that left an asteroid field between Saturn and uh,
Our moon,
and Jupiter, or Saturn and Jupiter. Now our moon showed up right
probably
now.
our moon.
It could have been the Death Star that showed up and blew up Elderon and then decided to park in trailer
Yeah.
parking outside in our hemisphere. But I was afraid to go there in this conversation because I don't want people to not go take the next step because what's on the other side of the rabbit hole is just too stupid looking to them for them to take the next step. But I will say that there was a people that were in Egypt that when their name was translated was the people that existed before the moon showed up. And so
Yeah.
they were just known as an old society that was around before the deluge, basically. And so they were associating the moon showing up with the deluge that happened 13,000 years ago when they named this Egyptian group that had made it somehow through it all. And obviously we made it or we wouldn't be here. But um, if that thing is what it looks like, it's a hollow metal satellite that was placed there. And it's facing us all the time, not showing us its backside like it's got equipment inside of it that drives it. And but how does a hollow metal hull do that unless there's a computer inside? And so the whole thing is just it's scary to think about. But what takes it to the next level is when you find out that Moses was part of a moon cult, and that Sinai, that what he went up on top of, he went up there to talk to the moon that the mountain was named after, and because Sin was the first name for the moon in Aramaic, and so Once you understand the etymology of it, you start understanding that its influence is something that we were born under in our recent generations, and that before that it wasn't there. And we had a different kind of influence happening before it showed up. But now we're completely dependent on it. If it went away, it would wreck us again, and we'd have to reset ourselves and how to try to. There'd be a new. We'd have to find balance. There'd probably be another ice age. But so nobody wants that to happen, really. But we're dependent on that thing, whatever it is. It's like a pacemaker, and it could be housing things that are living off of us, and it could be or supporting things that are living off of our energies and benefiting from the turmoil that we don't understand produces energy in our societies. And so the constant fracking of crisis in our society creates almost an ethereal turmoil that can be harvested by entities that know far more about that form of energy than we do. And they may have created us to help them do things like this. So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, created us to do that, or at the very least, hijacked us. So
Hijack the planet for sure.
yeah.
But is there anywhere you want to take this before we probably got about 10 more minutes before I have to extricate myself and do some things with my fam. But I'll let you take it wherever you want to here.
Oh wow, it was so much easier following your lead, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I'll try to help if you can think of anything that's really like important to you. We went over money, we went over meat and parasites, undetectable parasites. It's a bioweapon, but
Yeah, and I think in that soup is definitely, and these are in the nets of Belial as you've described in the past, but in that soup, in that recipe is definitely, you say the word government and people immediately flinch. It impacts everybody differently, but I'll make it simpler. It's authority. It's this notion which is betrayed even by the word itself, that if you author something, a document, that now has power, and to people that are trapped in the two-dimensional realm and want to be persons. They don't want to be men or women. Yeah, I mean, I guess the sorcery works, but the idea I could write something down on this piece of paper here, and then I can whatever decree or say some magic words over it, and now you have to obey that. And I think here we are, obviously in another election year. If that election even sees the light of day, I think they have different plans this year, frankly. But that trap right there is kind of the cherry on top of the sundae, as I see it, because
we're deferring our free will to the lesser of two evils again.
every time, and then the idea that 51% can rule over the other 49%, which doesn't even happen. I mean, that would be if it was somehow a pure representative democracy and constitutional republic and all that fun mind control jargon. Even then, the idea that people would lose their free will, or a portion of their free will, even to another group of people, based on a process of casting ballots, which is actually a form of gambling, which is, again, hilarious that Christians are participating in anything like this. It's casting lots, it's casting ballots and casting lots. Right. There's very little difference between the two. Some would argue there's no difference. So yeah, here we are with this belief in authority, and this idea that a portion of our and you're right, it's a trade-off. I mean, the reason we like the idea of authority is because then I can abdicate part or all of my responsibility to beings, or whether they be otherworldly or they be right here on earth. I can farm that out to other people. I don't really need to know anything. I just need to choose. I don't need to be a thinker. I can be a chooser. And at the end of the day, especially given our current fallen state, if I can use that terminology, thinking is very difficult. It's even more difficult for people when their guts are full of, parasites, um, and they're chasing around these tokens. But yeah, I mean, choosing is not thinking, and I also have a huge problem with belief. Like another word that I think betrays itself. I mean, occasionally you'll see in the truth movement people spelling belief as be lie, and that is it's be the lie, and it probably even has it's
That's
roots even
related to
further
Belial.
into belief. Yeah. So yeah, that's a whole area. I know we don't have enough time to unpack that monstrous thing, but here we are again at a time when people are setting their sights and their dreams and their hopes and their visions on getting the right slave master in the big white building, which I don't even think that
Right.
big white building is occupied anymore. But
Wow, that was well
whatever.
said. That was well said. I hadn't even thought
Um,
of that.
yeah, but it's not. It's just not. There's no one in
They
that building
abolished
right now.
slavery and then made us all slaves.
Well, they did. Well, they did, and that's provable with the 14th Amendment. Um, that was emancipation is not freedom. It's the opposite. It's ownership, and they transferred all the property of the people of dark pigment skin tones. They transferred those people into the ownership of the state, and they paid their slave masters to do so. So people don't realize that the slave owners were compensated for that move. But with the same stroke of that same pen, they made every natural born man and woman after that point uh, slaves as well. So yeah, the plantations weren't ended; they just made the whole thing a plantation. So but
Wow.
yeah, here we are. Going into another election season, and people are going because they've abdicated so much responsibility for all these things in their lives, and they farmed it out to their favorite talk show host or their favorite pastor or their mom or their dad or Jesus. Because they've done that, now they have to figure out a way to at least every 4 years quell that part of them, that subconscious part of their mind, that right side of the brain that might still be connected to something. Uh, and they got to quell that thing. They got to turn that squelch knob way up so they don't hear anymore. And it's like, I'm going to do something super responsible. I'm going to go out and exercise my civic duty. It has all these platitudes attached to it. I'm going to exercise my civic duty, and I'm going to cast this lot
This
in a
bail
scheme.
lot.
Yeah, exactly. In a scheme that shouldn't even exist, in order to fix everything I've let go for the last 4 years as a man or as a woman. And yeah, it's grotesque and it's preposterous. And that's I think that's kind of that's where the other stuff we're talking about is more the meat and potatoes. This is the grinder. This is the deep fryer. This is the mechanics of the thing and why it works so well, because then you can abdicate portions or all of your life over to other people that will then fix the things that you've let go. And it's very alluring, and it's the best way to keep that subconscious connection with the original creator. It's the best way to keep that at bay and to quell it and to make it, to satisfy it. It's not satisfied. It's not stupid. But it's the best way to shove it in the corner and put a dunce cap on its head for another 4 years and say, just shut up, sit over there and shut up. I don't want to hear from you.
Yeah,
Which is what,
little software
which is
patches to make the computers work together for a little bit longer until they figure out what the next one needs to be.
yeah, yeah. That bipolar design is pretty intelligent, because yeah, you've got like the EEPROM and you've got the external, but it was supposed to be the checks and balances, I think, to keep us, so you need all three of these things to really make it work. If you don't have all three of these things, none of the software patches work. The hard drive will fail. We'll either all go throw ourselves off 30-story buildings, or something will happen. Some conclusion will happen. We'll reset the entire thing somehow, but we don't do any of that because it's the perfect balance of, it they've scrambled the signal at every level. Basically, is the best way I can put it.
Scott, let me ask you if you would be interested in doing a discussion with maybe one or two other people in the future that may or may not share our opinions,
Sure,
because
absolutely.
you're very articulate, and I like, that you have the background that you do, so that you can speak from some knowledge. I usually I'm the one in the conversation that was the most born again, but I was never actually deep enough. I was never actually as deep as you were in it. So I think that demands a little respect, and just your knowledge of it obviously demands respect. So um, I, yeah, cool.
I'd be happy to. I think again, I think the dialogue. People like you and I can bounce these concepts off each other and share our information. That's great for sharpening the steel. But at the end of the day, we have to bring this in front of people who are trapped in the which you've done, which I've seen your work. You have to bring it in front of people who are trapped in the matrix, so that
Thank you.
those that want to reason can see what happens when truth collides with falsity, basically. So
Thank you. Well, I know nothing about this game, so and I'm definitely not trying to monetize what I do. So I haven't done more than gotten more than 155 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I don't really know how or even if I want to blow it up. But I know that if I can get this information out there to 100, 200 people, 1,000 people, and even if they forget my name, just as long as they remember the information, that would be perfect for a perfect outcome for me.
I'll send you a link later on to a YouTube channel I started up about 7 years ago. Got very limited traction. Obviously, the content was exactly what the social engineers don't want out there. So obviously, it's not going to appeal to advertisers or the algorithms or anything like that. But I'll send that to you so you can see what I've tried to do in the past, mostly on the authority and monetary side of the equation.
Mhm.
And you can see if there's anything in there that
Yeah, I'd like to see
that
it.
might make me qualified to speak on other subjects as well. So yeah,
I'm sure you are. Um, and I would have been pleased if you weren't qualified as qualified as you were. I had no idea that you were. That's why I wanted you to tell us, just so that people would know where this speaking from authority came from on the subject. So it was a pleasure, Scott, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And enjoy your Sunday.
Nicholas, thanks for putting it together. I appreciate it, man. We'll
Thanks.
talk
Have a
soon.
good one. Okay. Bye.
All right, you too. Bye.